This video is called Why There is Still Debate and is part of the expansion pack providing further detail to the arguments contained in the video How It All Ends. This video will explore the question of why there is still popular debate on the topic of global climate change in spite of overwhelming agreement in the scientific realm. I've sometimes heard the objection, but I've heard the opposite of all of what you're saying about climate change, so doesn't that prove it's still being debated? Sure. I guess by definition, if you see differing opinions, then it's still being debated. In the media, in the popular press, in the blogosphere, but not in the scientific realm. As you may have seen in the video Risk Management, the unprecedented statements from AAAS and NAS, probably the two most well-respected scientific organizations on the planet, make it clear that the best that science has to offer tells us that the globe is warming, we're the ones doing it, it's going to be bad, and we better do something about it quick. If these statements, as well as the others examined in that video, make for such a slam dunk, then why do we, in the US at least, still hear so much debate? I think there are a lot of probable reasons for that. First off, I found some surveys that indicate it's the lack of absolute certainty that's holding most people back. If that's the case for you, I think that if you watch the video Nature of Science, you'll see that waiting for certainty from science is a losing proposition. And if you watch the video Risk Management, you'll see that we can still make good decisions without knowing for certain what's going on with climate change. This hesitation on the public's part allows organizations and companies which stand to be inconvenienced or economically harmed in the short run to delay action by playing up that uncertainty of science. The basic way it works is this. Every statement in science is accompanied by an explicit acknowledgement of uncertainty. Good scientists will be very explicit about the uncertainty, going out of their way to call attention to it. Vested interests like trade organizations, think tanks, some governments, and individual companies then emphasize this uncertainty. The media has a couple of reasons to include and amplify this uncertainty. The first is they know that controversy sells. And the second is they get tired of being accused of bias, so they go out of their way to present the other side. Unfortunately, this creates the illusion that the two sides actually carry equal weight in the scientific community, which you've seen they don't. The Union of Concerned Scientists, which is an advocacy organization, but is rigorous enough that they are often consulted by the government, observed that public opinion can be easily manipulated because science is complex, people tend to not notice where their information comes from, and because the effects of global warming are just beginning to become visible. This is starting to change. Exxon, sort of the poster child for this dynamic of propagating public doubt about climate change, just recently made some stunning public shifts. In a January 2007 Wall Street Journal article, when Exxon's Vice President for Public Affairs Kenneth Cohen was speaking about greenhouse gas emissions and their effect on global temperatures, he was quoted as saying, quote, "Society knows enough now that the risk is serious and action should be taken," end quote. And in 2006, Exxon, after funding them for years, stopped funding the Competitive Enterprise Institute, a think tank that ran ads just last year saying that carbon dioxide is helpful rather than a problem. So there is indeed deliberate manipulation of public perception in order to serve the interests of stakeholders. On some level, I suppose you can't fault them. After all, they are just playing the game we've got, since the whole purpose of a publicly traded corporation is to increase value for shareholders, not do the greatest good for the greatest number. Although some of them you can fault. It's worth including here a story that I also share in the video No Holds Barred, just in case you don't manage to slog through that one, because it's significant and really helped galvanize me to action. On either side of this bitter debate, you hear accusations that the other side is in someone's pocket. From the skeptics, you'll hear, it's just a liberal plot to get control of our lives. And it's not uncommon for a warmer to imply that anyone who argues hard for the skeptical side must be a corporate shill. I figured that the idea of vested interests hiring people to surf the net and argue for the skeptical side wasn't too outlandish, but I also thought it sounded a little too sinister to probably be true. Well, a couple of months ago, I was reading a back-and-forth discussion about Grist.com's How to Talk to a Climate Skeptic, and there was one guy really taking the lead for the skeptical view. Google the exact phrase, "We're all seekers for truth here," with quotes, with the quote marks, and you'll get exactly one hit if you want to see what I'm talking about. And there's one guy taking the lead for the skeptical view, talking quite reasonably about how there's a lot to be said for both sides, and the science on the issue is divided, which is why people are divided, etc. He was saying stuff like, quote, "The truth is that reasonable people of goodwill can look at the same evidence and come to opposite conclusions, including scientists. This is what makes the climate change debate so interesting. It is one of the greatest scientific debates in history," end quote. Seemed like a very reasonable guy, nice guy who just happened to hold a different opinion than mine. Imagine my surprise and horror when someone outed this guy as a consultant hired by the electric power industry. And as soon as he was revealed, the guy immediately disappeared, though he had been countering almost every point up until then. It was really creepy, especially when I looked back at the stuff he had written that I had excused before as being simply uninformed, but really was deliberately manipulative and downright intellectually dishonest. This is what makes the climate debate so interesting. It's not interesting, you jerk. It's potentially life or death for real people if the worst case scenarios actually come to pass. We're not sure it'll happen, but that's what the rest of us are sincerely trying to avoid. And if you find it an interesting discussion, it's hard to convey how angry that makes me to see someone so careless about their impact on other people's lives. I felt so violated. I share this with you here because you should know that there are indeed selfish, dishonest people out there who will try to manipulate you for their own benefit, regardless of any harm to you. Given that I actually ran across a guy doing this leads me to conclude that it's not that outlandish to assign a good amount of the remaining public debate about the issue to a campaign of vested interest to take the inherent uncertainty of all science and cloud the public's perception of the issue. That said, being human, we do have a number of psychological factors which make us quite susceptible to exactly that kind of manipulation.